Hello and welcome, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We're going to start our series today talking about ACT prep, and what I'm going to walk y'all through is the science portion. So over the next 20 to 30, maybe 40 videos, I'm going to be going through giving you tips and tricks and what you can do to prepare to increase your score on the ACT. So thank you so much for making it here today. We'll go ahead and hop into it and see what we're talking about today. So the ACT, specifically the science portion. Here's some stuff that you really need to know in order to do well on this part of the ACT. Okay, so first of all, it's the last portion of the ACT out of the multiple choice sections. Okay, so you'll take 4 multiple choice tests on ACT day. The last one is the science section. The science section of the ACT is 35 minutes, and in that time, you have to answer 40 questions, okay? And those 40 questions are spread throughout 6 passages, okay? Right now, I'll just tell you that a passage includes anything like a table, a graph, a figure, a diagram, or a reading passage, okay? So all of those would count. Basically, what you really want to know here is that you have to answer 35 questions. You have to answer 40 questions in 35 minutes. So you really can't spend that long on any individual question. Sometimes it's better just to make a guess and move on, okay? So here's some other keys to success I wanted to share with y'all today, okay? All the questions in the science section require the use of the passage to answer the question. So a lot of times students feel like they have to use what they are learning in their science class. That's not always the case. If a question tells you to go look at part of the passage, sometimes it'll say look at table 1 or according to diagram 2. If it tells you to go look at a part of the passage, the answer is there somewhere, okay? So you need a firm grasp of fundamental scientific processes in order to do really well on this test. Students are expected to have completed 1 year of high school biology and 1 year of high school physical science prior to test day. Here's some other information you want to know about the ACT portion of the science portion of the ACT. Okay, this is the type of subject matter you might see on there. Okay, so on the ACT test, although reading comprehension and graphic literacy are important skills, in general, people feel better and can move quicker on science topics they have studied before. So look at this table right here, and it'll show you what type of passages or what type of subjects you'll see on the ACT. So in that, out of those 6 passages, 2 of them are always going to be about biology. That's usually the first science that people take in high school, so they go ahead and put 2 passages on that. And then out of chemistry, physics, and earth and space science, you'll get at least 1 of each of those, but you can have up to 2. So it's always a random combination. You always have 2 biology, and then you have 1 chemistry, 1 physics, 1 earth and space, and then you'll have another either chemistry, physics, or earth and space science. It can be 1 or 2 for those, okay? So this is important because sometimes if you feel like you have a good understanding of biology and can move through those passages faster, sometimes it's better to go and find those passages and do them first because you already have some background information to use, okay? And then you can see the breakdown of the number of questions that you'll get according to those subjects, as well as the percentage of the tests that those subjects make up. Okay, so some more information about the science courses you want to know about before you take the science portion of the ACT. It is not assumed that students have studied all 4 of those science courses on test day. However, it is assumed that they will take 3 science courses by graduation. All of this to say, it is a misconception that the science section does not have much to do with science and only tests reading comprehension and graph interpretation. Sometimes you'll hear people say, you don't even need to know science in order to take the science section. It's all reading graphs and looking at tables. And that's true. A lot of the questions are based off of tables and figures and graphs, but you can move quicker if you've studied that topic before. So this is why often the science section of the ACT score will increase as you go through high school, because you'll start off with biology, but then you might take an earth and space or a chemistry or a physics, and then you'll continue as you get up to that junior and senior year. You've studied most of the topics before. So it's a misconception to say you don't need to study those things. You only need to be able to read a graph, because that's going to help increase your speed. And the ACT a lot of the times is just a time management test. The quicker you can move, the higher your score is going to be. Okay? Here are the types of passages you will get on the science section of the ACT. There's 3 different types of passages. Okay? So in the science section, the 40 questions are spread throughout 6 passages, and there are 3 different types of passages, and I'll give you more information on these here in just a second. So you're always going to get 2 data representation passages. A data representation passage is just what it sounds like. It's representing some type of data. These are often the shortest. Sometimes they are only 100 words long, and then either a table or a graph to go along with it. Okay, you'll always get 3 research summaries. Again, just like the name would suggest, they are summarizing some sort of research that has been done. You get 3 of those. These tend to be middle length. They're not as short as the data representation, but they're not the longest type of passage either. Okay, the longest one is called the conflicting viewpoints. You only get 1 of these per section of the ACT, and these are very easy to identify because they are very long. There's a lot of reading involved with the conflicting viewpoints. With this type of passage, you will often not have a table or a graph or a figure. It's just words. These tend to be the longest of the different passages, and a lot of times I just tell people to skip this one and save it for last. Like I said earlier, the ACT is a lot about time management, and you don't want to spend all your time reading through these passages when you can go and do the shorter ones first. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move into practice exams and practice science questions. Sometimes if you get to this part of it, if you see that really long passage, if it doesn't have any graphs or tables to go along with it, you might consider just skipping it and coming back to it later, because this is going to be the one that takes you the longest to do. Here's a little bit more detail on these different types of passages, and later on we'll go through and actually practice trying to identify these. So let's look at the data representation up top. These data representation, often they're abbreviated as just DR. So DR passages are the shortest passage type. They are approximately 100 words long. In addition to the text, data representation passages also contain 1 or more data presentations in the form of tables, figures, or diagrams. The passage text typically defines any unknown terms or units of measure and describes the data presentations. So like I said, you'll either get a table or a graph or a figure, and then a brief summary of it in a form of a paragraph or 2. But that paragraph tends to be very short at only 100 words. Okay, and you get 2 of the data representations per ACT. Okay, then the next one is research summaries. These are abbreviated as RS. So RS passages are approximately 275 words long, and they describe 1 or more experiments and explain at least 1 data presentation. This passage type can be identified by the paragraph headers, experiments, or study. So when you're reading over these passages, they'll often head a paragraph off by saying experiment 1, experiment 2, or study 1, study 2. Again, these are about 275 words long, so they're in that middle length, and you always get at least 1 data, table, or figure in those as well. Okay, the last one is the conflicting viewpoints. Often what's going on here is you're reading the viewpoints of 2 or 3 different scientists, and the viewpoints of those scientists are often sometimes they align and sometimes they're in opposition to each other. So of the 3 passages, the conflicting viewpoint passages have the most reading at about 350 words. The passage text usually includes a description of a concept or phenomenon, followed by multiple viewpoints that attempt to explain that phenomenon. So again, these tend to be the longest, and I do typically tell people to skip them. If you find that the best part of the ACT for you is the reading part, so you're really, really good at reading comprehension, you might actually want to go ahead and do the conflicting viewpoints, because that's basically what it is. You get a lot of information. You have to figure out the similarities and differences in between those viewpoints for the scientists. If you have really, really good reading comprehension, this is basically a reading comprehension question with kind of a science spin on it. But typically, if you are struggling with time management, this would be the one that I suggest you skip, because it's going to take you the longest to do. Okay? Let's just take a quick look at the type of questions you'll get. So when we're talking about the types of questions on the ACT, what we often call them is reporting categories. So when you hear me say reporting categories, I'm talking about the types of questions you might get. Okay, so here are the 3 different types of questions you'll get. You'll get questions that ask you to interpret data. So these are the ones that have you go look at a table or look at a graph and you're trying to figure out what's going on there. Okay, you usually get 16 to 20 of those questions, and that makes up about half of the test. Okay. Another type of question you'll get is evaluation of models, inferences, and experimental results. A lot of times this one's asking you about the scientific process. So why did they set a lab up or an experiment up in a certain way? Okay, you'll get about 10 to 14 of these, and that makes up about 1/4 to 35% of the test. And then the questions that are the most rare are called scientific investigations. These make up about 23 to 30% of the test. And we'll talk about these in some more detail as this series goes on, okay? Great. So let's keep it going. So here are passage and question types. So although a passage can have any question type, the design of passages makes certain question types more common. So again, as a reminder, you have 6 passages. Those 6 passages can have anywhere from 5 to 8 questions each, but they total 40 questions total. Okay, you always get 3 research summary passages. Those are the middle length ones. And the question type that's most common with that passage is the scientific investigation. Okay, you get 2 of the data representation. Those are the short passages at about 100 words. And the question type that is the most common for those are the interpretation of data. Okay, and then the conflicting viewpoints, that's a really long one with a lot of reading. The type of question that's most common with those are the evaluation of models, inferences, and experimental results. Okay, and we'll kind of talk about why all of this is important to know as we move on. Typically, students are missing a certain type of question, and if we can identify which question you're missing the most of, that helps us figure out what you need to work on later down the line. So right now, I'm just kind of introducing some of the vocabulary, some of the words that we're going to use. Later on, I'll show you why they're so important and how knowing about the different types of questions can help increase your score as you're trying to prepare for it down the line. Okay? Y'all, thank you so much for following along with me today. As this series progresses, we're really hoping to bump that ACT score up on the science section. Sometimes the science section, it can be really difficult for students, but if you follow along with me, I'm going to make sure we get those scores up. Thank you so much for making it today, and I hope y'all have a great day.